Good morning. This video lecture is for class 7th, subject English. This lesson has been taken from your An Alien Hand textbook, chapter 9, A Tiger in the House. And this is lecture 1 for the chapter. The entire lesson is going to be covered in one video lecture only. So now let's quickly see what is there in this video lecture. With the title of the story, A Tiger in the House, I think it's very clear that the story is all about a tiger who is in the house. Can you imagine a tiger in the house? I cannot imagine a tiger in the house. Now let's see what the story is all about. Contents that I am going to cover in this video lecture will be introduction, then the explanation of the story will be there, new words and the meanings, followed by classwork and then homework. It's mandatory to do the homework. It's a very easy lesson, A Tiger in the House. Now without wasting time, let's quickly start the story. Introduction. What is there or what is the story A Tiger in the House all about? Grandfather finds a tiny tiger cub in the forest and brings him home. Grandmother calls him Timotho and brings him up like a human child. Timotho is playful and naughty. His companions are Toto, the monkey, a puppy, and other members of the household. As Timotho grows up, he becomes less friendly and rather dangerous. Grandfather decides to transfer him to the zoo. 6 months later, grandfather pays Timotho a visit. Timotho is happy to see grandfather. Or is he? Now, there's a story about a tiger in the house. There was a small, tiny tiger cub who was found in the forest, and the grandfather brings him home. After that, grandmother gives him a name of Timotho, and he is brought like a human child. The way a human child is fed, even Timotho was also fed the same way by the grandmother. Timotho is very playful and naughty. His companion means his friends which were there along with him, were Toto the monkey, a puppy, and other members of the household. Timotho grows up and he becomes less friendly and rather dangerous. You have seen a healthy tiger, a big tiger. Isn't it dangerous? So that's what they are saying here. As Timotho grows up, he becomes less friendly and rather dangerous. And grandfather finally decides to transfer him to the zoo. And 6 months later, when grandfather goes and he meets Timotho, Timotho was very happy to see the grandfather. Clear? Now we are going to start with the first para of the story. Now let's read the story in large. This was just the introduction of the entire chapter. Moving ahead with the next slide. A Tiger in the House. Timotho, the tiger cub, was discovered by grandfather in the Terai jungle near Tehra. One day when grandfather was strolling down the forest path at some distance from the rest of the party, he discovered a little tiger about 18 inches long hiding among the intricate roots of a banyan tree. Grandfather picked him up and brought him home. He had the distinction of being the only member of the party to have bagged any game, dead or alive. At first, the tiger cub, who was named Timotho by grandmother, was brought up entirely on milk given to him in a feeding bottle by our cook, Mahmoud. But the milk proved too rich for him and he was put on a diet of raw mutton and cod liver oil, to be followed later by a more tempting diet of pigeons and rabbits. Timothy was provided with two companions, Toto the monkey, who was bold enough to pull the young tiger by the tail and then climb up the curtains if Timothy lost his temper, and a small mongrel puppy found on the road by grandfather. So basically Timothy tiger cub, he was discovered by grandfather when he went to the Terai jungle near Tehran, and when one day grandfather was strolling means walking down. Once he was walking down the forest path, some distance he found a little tiger about 18 inches long, and he was hiding among the intricate roots. Intricate means complicated roots of a banyan tree, and grandfather decided to pick him up and he brought him home. When he brought him home, grandmother named him Timothy, and he was given milk by a feeding bottle with the help of the cook Mahmood. But milk proved to be too rich for him, so he was put on a diet of raw mutton and cod liver oil, and then he was given diet of pigeons and rabbits. Okay, so Timothy was provided with two companions, Toto the monkey and the other one was a small little mongrel puppy. Clear? Shall we move ahead? So moving to the next para. At first Timothy appeared to be quite afraid of the puppy, and darted back with a spring if it came too near. He would make absurd dashes at it with his large forepaws and then retreat to a ridiculously safe distance. Finally, he allowed the puppy to crawl on his back and rest there. One of Timothy's favorite amusement was to stalk anyone who would play with him. And so, when I came to live with grandfather, I became one of the tiger's favorites. With a crafty look in his glittering eyes and his body crouching, he would creep closer and closer to me, suddenly making a dash for my feet, rolling over on his back and kicking with delight and pretending to bite my ankles. He was by this time the size of a full-grown retriever, and when I took him out for walks, people on the road would give us a wide berth. When he pulled hard on his chain, I had difficulty in keeping up with him. So now what happened? First, Timothy appeared to be quite afraid of the puppy, but gradually, and he always darted back with him. Means he always used to put him back. He used to always dart him on the back. And then later on, he allowed the puppy to crawl on his back. And then again followed day. Timothy's favorite amusement was to stalk anyone. Stalk means to look at anyone, to see anyone who would play with him. And so when I came to live with grandfather, I became one of Tiger's favorite. So he also became Tiger's favorite. With a crafty look in his glittering eyes and his body crouching, he would creep closer and closer to me, suddenly making a dash for my feet. Then further, what happened? That he always took him to the walk. He was by this time the size of a full-grown retriever. Whose retriever? It's a breed of a dog, a trained retrieve dog. So now the dog also grew up, and then they both used to go for a walk along with grandfather, and they both were tied to a chain. So that's what it's saying, that I had difficulty in keeping up with him because they used to walk really very fast, and the pace of the tiger is bit slow. So that's what he's saying, that I had difficulty in keeping up with the dog. Clear? Moving ahead. His favorite place in the house was the drawing room, and he would make himself comfortable on the long sofa, reclining there with great dignity and snarling at anybody who tried to get him off. Timothy had clean habits and would scrub his face with his paws exactly like a cat. He slept at night in the cook's quarters and was always delighted at being let out by him in the morning. One of these days, declared grandmother in her prophetic manner, we are going to find Timothy sitting on Mahmud's bed and no sign of the cook except his clothes and shoes. Of course, it never came to that. But when Timothy was about 6 months old, a change came over him. He grew steadily less friendly. When out for a walk with me, he would try to steal away to stalk a cat or someone's pet dog. So now basically what happened with the passing of time, Timothy became less friendly and he did not talk to anyone. And while he went for a walk, he used to look at a cat or someone's pet dog. And with those eyes, it was so scary that he was in a type that he is going to eat the cat or someone's pet dog. So now the tiger had grown, or he was turning to be very scary day by day. That's what they are saying. Moving ahead. Sometimes at night we would hear friends cackling from the poultry house, and in the morning there would be feathers lying all over the veranda. Timothy had to be chained up more often, and finally, when he began to stalk Mahmoud about the house with what looked like villainous intent, grandfather decided it was time to transfer him to a zoo, reserving a first-class compartment for himself and Timothy. No one would share a compartment with them. Grandfather took him to Lucknow, where the zoo authorities were only too glad to receive as a gift a well-fed and fairly civilized tiger. About 6 months later, when my grandparents were visiting relatives in Lucknow, grandfather took the opportunity of calling at the zoo to see how Timothy was getting on. I was not there to accompany him, but I heard all about it when I returned to Dehra. Arriving at the zoo, grandfather made straight for the particular cage in which Timothy had been interned. The tiger was there, crouched in a corner, full grown and with a magnificent striped coat. So now what happened, there were birds which used to come, okay, they used to make the cackling sound from the poultry house, and what they used to find in the morning, they would find all the feathers lying over the veranda. So now they knew that who ate all the birds. It was the tiger. Now Timothy had to be chained up. He was chained up for whole day. And finally, when he began to stalk Mahmud, he started stalking Mahmud. He was in an intent to eat him up. Okay, this is what they have said. What looked like villainous intent. Villainous intent means the intent of a villain. Somebody looking at you with wicked and dangerous plans, right? And then grandfather decided that it was time to transfer him to a zoo, And reserving a first class compartment, he took Timothy to the zoo and he left him with the zoo authorities. And zoo authorities also accepted Timothy as a gift because he was a very well-fed and fairly civilized tiger. And about 6 months later, when grandfather had to go to meet any of his relatives in Lucknow, he took opportunity and he went and he met Timothy. Now let's see what happened when he went and he met Timothy. Moving ahead. "Hello, Timothy," said grandfather, and put his arm through the bars of the cage. The tiger approached the bars and allowed grandfather to put both hands around his head. Grandfather stroked the tiger's forehead and tickled his ears, and whenever he growled, smacked him across the mouth, which was his old way of keeping him quiet. He licked grandfather's hands and only sprang away when a leopard in the next cage snarled at him. Grandfather's hooted the leopard away, and the tiger returned to lick his hands. But every now and then the leopard would rush at the bars and he would slink back to his corner. A number of people had gathered to watch the reunion when a keeper pushed his way through the crowd and asked grandfather what he was doing. "I am talking to Timothy," said grandfather. "We aren't you here aren't you here when I gave him to the zoo 6 months ago?" "I haven't been here very long," said the surprised keeper. "Please continue your conversation, but I have never been able to touch him myself. He's always very bad-tempered." Now, when the grandfather went and he met Timothy, Timothy was very happy. The way he used to lick grandfather's hand, he started licking. And there was a keeper who came and he said that the tiger is dangerous. But he said, "You don't know. I have been keeping him from long." And then they both were touching each other. Tiger was licking grandfather's hand. Then the keeper said that, "I have never been able to touch Timothy myself. He's always very bad tempered, and I'm very grateful to see that he is licking your hands and you are able to touch him, because he never allows anyone to touch him, as whenever we touch him he's always very bad tempered." Clear? Moving ahead, let's see what happens. "Why don't you put him somewhere else?" suggested grandfather. "That leopard keeps frightening him. I'll go and see the superintendent about it." Grandfather went in search of the superintendent of the zoo, but found that he had gone home early. And so, after wandering about the zoo for a little while, he returned to Timothy's cage to say goodbye. It was beginning to get dark. He had been stroking and slapping Timothy for about 5 minutes when he found another keeper observing him with some alarm. Grandfather recognized him as the keeper who had been there when Timothy had first come to the zoo. "You remember me?" said grandfather. "Now why don't you transfer Timothy to another cage, away from this stupid leopard?" "But sir," stammered the keeper, it is not your tiger." I know," said grandfather. I realized he is no longer mine, but you might at least take a suggestion or two from me. I remember you, I remember your tiger very well, said the keeper. He died 2 months ago. Died? Exclaimed grandfather. Yes, sir, of pneumonia. This tiger was trapped in the hills only last month and he is very dangerous. Okay, so Timothy here had died, and the tiger which the grandfather was touching or loving was the other tiger. Can you please repeat the same lines? I remember your tiger very well, said the keeper. He died 2 months ago. Died? Exclaimed grandfather. Yes, sir, of pneumonia. This tiger was trapped in the hills only last month and he's very dangerous. Clear? Moving ahead. Grandfather could think of nothing to say. The tiger was still licking his arm with increasing relish. Grandfather took what seemed to him an age to withdraw his hand from the cage. With his face near the tiger's, he mumbled, "Good night, Timothy," and giving the keeper a scornful look, walked briskly out of the zoo. So now grandfather went back. He said same thing to the tiger, that good night, Timothy, and giving a keeper a scornful look, a hateful look, walked hurriedly out of the zoo. He ran from the zoo. Clear? The story is being written by Ruskin Bond. Moving ahead with the new words and the meaning. First word, companions, a person with whom one spends a lot of time. Intricate, very complicated or detailed. Distinction, a difference or contrast between similar things or people. Tempting, appealing to or attracting someone. Next. Darted, move or run somewhere suddenly or rapidly. Absurd, wildly unreasonable. Ridiculously, so as to cause surprise or disbelief. Moving next. Stalk, the main stem attached or support a leaf. Crouching, position where knees are bent. Creep, move slowly and carefully in order to avoid being heard or noticed. Retriever, a dog of a breed used for retrieving game. Snarling, make an aggressive growl with bared teeth. Compartment, a separate section. Civilized, bring to a stage of social and cultural development. Interned, someone as a prisoner. Crouched, a position in which knees are bent. Smacked, strike. Snarled, make an aggressive growl. So, moving next. Stammered, speak with sudden involuntary pauses. Stalk, the main stem of a herbaceous plant. Frenzied, wildly excited or uncontrollable. Villainous, guilty of wicked or criminal behavior. Scornful, feeling or expressing contempt. Briskly, in an active, quick or energetic way. Okay, So moving to the next slide. Classwork. Shoot animals with a camera, not with a gun. You have to comment on the statement. Keeping pets help us become more loving and tolerant. It also helps us respect life in any form. Do you agree? Have you heard of the Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Animals? What do they do? So we will be discussing all these three answers in the class. Moving ahead with homework, answer the following questions. First question, where was the tiger cub hiding when grandfather found him? Question number 2, what did Toto do to entertain Timotho? Next, what did he do when Timotho lost his temper? I became one of the tiger's favorites. Who is I in the statement? Why did he think so? Next, where was Timotho most comfortable during the day? Where was he during the night? Question number 5. What was grandmother's prophecy about the cook? Did it come true? Next, what made grandfather decide to transfer Timotho to the zoo? Next, why did grandfather want Timotho to be put in another enclosure? Next, what shocked grandfather in the end? So these are the 8 question answers that you have to do in your fair notebook. Clear to everyone? That's all for the chapter, A Tiger in the Zoo. I hope you people have liked the story. It was a very emotional story and it was about an animal who was loved, cared, and then he was sent to the zoo. And later on, grandfather came to know that he had died 2 months ago. So this is the story all about. We shall be again doing the story in the class, and please kindly do the homework. Okay. Thank you. Have a nice day.